This is big. This is big. That is the 10th coach in UW Green Bay men's basketball history. That is Doug Gottlieb. Doug, welcome to Green Bay, man.
I'm super happy to be here, but I'm not happy with your co-host. I mean, he still owes. So I don't know if you know this. John and I been friends forever, and he was my neighbor in Griswold Farms. And the neighbor, he was fine as a neighbor, except for when Favre was first coming back with the Vikings. Okay, first coming back with the Vikings. When that thing, I asked him, I was like, how hard is it to get tickets here? He's like, tickets, you can have my mom's tickets. She refuses to go and see Brett Favre play in a Minnesota Vikings uniform.
Yep.
So I'm like, high fiving, I'm there. And he's like, and she's got a great basement. You'll love it. Like, all you got to do is buy a plane ticket. I'm like, great. Awesome. And, Katie's right down the street. I got built-in babysitting too from his daughter. Like, the whole thing is amazing. And then, like, I don't know, I'm starting to arrange travel there. Maybe, I'm a last second dude. So it's probably like a week and a half before the game. And he's like, oh, hey, my mom's going to use the ticket. He's like, but you can still stay in her basement. Like, do you know how hard it is to get those tickets?
Yeah. Again, I feel like this is a problem you need to take up with my mother and not me. That's
I'm not thinking that with your mother. No, she has a better jump shot than me. I know she's a tougher lady than I am.
Well,
so I'm simply going to say it's your fault.
Okay, I'll take the blame. Actually,
this is like a bad NIL transaction. Where I was promised $100,000 and I end up coming home with like $5.
This is it. Yep, totally. By the way, she doesn't jump shoot. She's got this old set shot, but she can sit at 82 and still knock it down like you would not believe. Dude, honestly, when we were at the Final Four one time, which is all she wanted to go, she's sitting over one time in our green room, and she's sitting talking with Bob Knight and Bob's second wife, Karen, right, who coached 6-on-6 basketball there in Oklahoma. And my mom was a great 6-on-6 player, and her dad was good. And they're literally all but, moving snacks around the table, drawing up offense. So, like, you might want her on the bench. Like, she's legit. She knows what she's doing. So, and if we get into the make up your staff, I'll lobby harder. But for now, we'll get into just the guy who's on the lead.
Like here. So just so you guys know, and I am too much of an open book. But I hate the nation thing. Right. Yep. Like, I don't like Phoenix Nation, right. Green Bay Nation. Like, come on, man. But to people in Wisconsin who are watching the show, and I watch the show, and to Phoenix fans and people who are just kind of looky-loos, like, that's kind of interesting. Like, I want to purport myself to be what I've always been, which is honest to a fault. And if you got a question, I'll give you the most honest answer I can possibly give you without crushing relationships and violating NCAA rules and HIPAA laws and all that stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, we'll get up.
So if you have a question, I'll answer it. You might not like the answer.
Eventually we're gonna get. I want to talk about who could be on the staff, because I feel like I better know some of these names. But anyway, I want to know though how you became the 10th coach in UWGB history, because I know you were close to being the 9th. Coaching Green Bay. So how is it the second time around when you got a second AB, you managed to get home?
Maybe Josh is just not that inventive a dude, and he just went down the list of guys that would pick up the phone. I don't know. I can tell you how our relationship started, which was, believe it or not, my brother interviewed and was I think a finalist or semi-finalist when Will Ryan was when Link left. And so, we had talked kind of through the job and whatever. And I have a lot of friends, obviously not as many as you do, John, in the Valley, in the state of Wisconsin. I'm pretty close with Shaka. Mike Kelly, the father of our country from Wisconsin, a dear friend of mine. I thought he was an amazing broadcaster before he chose to be Tommy Boy and run his dad's factory. It's like one of those, I always paid attention to states and always paid attention to jobs. And I remember, here's what really happens in basketball. I don't know if we'd say this happens at Sports Center or when guys leave and they go to Fox or whatever, is if like my brother didn't get the job, so you're sitting there going like, okay, well, if this guy does well, then they made the right hire. If they did poorly, they should have hired my brother. So I was watching this thing go, it wasn't going the right direction. But when Josh chose to move on, and I think it was, I want to say like late January, early February, I just happened to have a game like Michigan State and Wisconsin in Madison. So I got his number and I texted him and I was just like, hey man, you know, I'd love to meet you, want to catch up and talk. So we met halfway in between Madison and Green Bay. He'd probably know the location of the Starbucks. I could look back through my app. And here's a real story. I'm gonna sell Josh out on this one. So I'm bad with time. Okay? I'm bad with time. And I know this about myself. But when things are important to me, especially first, meeting people, first impressions that don't know you, like I can be really good with time. So I think we agreed to like, hey, let's meet at 9:00 in Sheboygan. And I got there at like, I took a red eye in, landed in Chicago, drove straight there. And like, I'm going to just take a little nap in the parking lot, put back my chair, and then set my alarm. So I set my alarm and say we're meeting at 9. And like, I get out, it's like 8:30, go to brush my teeth, get back in my car, make a couple calls. And he pulls up and he parks closer to the Starbucks. And I'm like facing the other direction. So, I mean, like I'm a rental. He doesn't know, he doesn't see me. He doesn't know who I am. So he gets out and just, no snot rocket. I'm snot blow, whatever.
Farmer blow.
Yeah.
What is it?
Farmer blow.
Okay, there we go. So I'm starting to understand. So he goes like hardcore, both sides snot rocket, right as I'm walking up behind him. And I was like, whew, that's impressive. Fire a coach and then blow a hell of a snot rocket. Nice to meet you. And he turns around and the look on his face was awesome. So we just kind of talked and got to know each other and, kind of like, what are you looking for? And what do you think the job needs? And I said to him, and I know it to be true because in all honesty, a lot of what Sonny was able to do was similar to my plan. His was a little different, but similar to plan. And the point is, like, if you talk about I'm the 10th head coach, right? I mean, without going depth of knowledge, I can think of 5 of them have done great. Like, so it's not the program's fault as much when they don't win, right? It's the fit of the coach. I mean, Sonny did a hell of a job. Link had a hell of a team, right? He wasn't connecting with the community, but Link was going to win. I think he was going to win the league. And then you kind of go back. I'm close with Brian Wardle, and he did obviously an amazing job. If Kiefer doesn't get hurt, who knows how that story ends. And of course, Coach Bennett did the most remarkable job and built a consistent winner. And I remember sitting at a sports bar in Orange County and watching them take down Cal. So knowing history of it, knowing that in Wisconsin and Minnesota and in the Plains, there's not a crazy amount of high major players, but of mid-major players, there's a lot. And kids want to play close to home. They do. And they're about the right things. They play the right way. It's a level that you can actually coach. You're not constantly worrying about agents and runners. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, like we're going to be in the portal and there's NIL and that's a huge part of it. But there still is this is the way it used to be, and it could be really cool. And so, we just had a conversation and we talked about it, and there was no real conversation about me and the job. And then when he circled back to, okay, hey, now we're going to get into interviewing people and going out and see people. And he had a general feel, are you interested in the job? And I said, of course. And I was like, well, could I still do my radio show? And we had a good discussion about it. And the basic one, I think it helps the radio show. I think it helps the basketball program as well, right? The part that's hard is that it's 2 jobs in one. The difference for me, and we can get to this further, is I've been doing 7 jobs anyway for several years, so this is going to be way, way, way easier. So last year I went through the process, and the night before the Big Ten championship game, I drove up from Chicago to Green Bay, and I met with Chancellor Mike, and he was great. And they took me around Titletown, and that was cool. And then I slept at the hotel, got up the next day, and he and I walked around campus, and then we met with the committee in town. And I enjoyed it. I appreciated it. I was, processing how it would all work, but I felt like I could do this. And then, and again, if I may be disclosing too much, but whatever, like, this is how it really works. People want to know how things really work. So, how it really works is the finalists, they send it's called an MOU, a memo of understanding. Okay. But Josh is a very honest guy, right? Has great integrity. And he said, listen, you're not the only one getting the MOU. I remember there's 3 other guys he sent an MOU to. And so when I got it, I was literally on the runway going from O'Hare back to Southern California. And, so you get to kind of process things. And I'm like, wow, if I sign this. Now, my daughters at the time were juniors in high school. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, whew. So I got back, I talked with my kids about it, and, they're like, Dad, for our senior year, like, we can't do Green Bay. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, man, this is so hard, right? Because you tell your kids, like, pursue your dreams. And, life will kind of figure itself out a little bit. So I didn't feel great about that element. On the other hand, I thought I could make it work. And I thought, it begins a different path, and you try it, just like the team will, just like the athletic department will try it, mm-hmm. and you see. And, I was in my head, I'm thinking, Wisconsin is like one of the greatest places on earth in the summer. I get them out in the summer. They'll be there. They'll do their thing. I went and looked, as John knows, my daughter is a championship level show jumper, and she's going to Oklahoma State to ride in the equestrian team. And I did some research on there's an X Center that's really close. I connected my daughter with, anyway, I'm going through all this process. I signed the MOU. Probably took me 3/4 of the day, and Josh was getting a little mm-hmm. antsy about it. And then the next day he called me and he said, hey, look, you won a lot of people over. It was awesome, but I'm going to go with Sonny. And, I just said, hey, look, I think Sonny's great. He's got the juice. I get that you guys work together. I get that he's been a head coach. I think I do a great job. I had a good plan, and I knew the guys I want to get in the portal. I had already had, meetings with I did Zoom meetings with my staff at the time. I had a staff ready to go that time, at the time. So we were all locked and loaded and going. We knew all the kids locally who we thought wanted to transfer back in, and we were ready to go. So I think I would guess that the thoroughness of the plan, as well as the energy and what the program needs, probably put me in a good position, but mm-hmm. not a good enough position to get it. So Thursday, and now throughout this year, I've kept in touch with Josh, because it's one of those things that this is what draws you to the job. Once you go there, you're like, oh, this place is cool, right? Like, this is dope. This place could be really, really fun. Could be really hard to play in. And so I'm not a bitter guy. You know, it's like one of these things. John and I have been through this thing. It's like, here's the example. It's like the wipeout example, right? I mean, John knows the story. They called Scott Van Pelt, and he turned it down, and he gives it to John. And
not exactly how that went. Good. It's good to know.
That's what. But the point is, like, you can't, if you don't get a job and somebody else does, like, excuse my language, you can't be a bitch about it, right? Like, it's not that guy's fault. He won the job. It changes his life too. And I already have a cool job and I have a cool life. So, you know, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. So I like Josh. We established a relationship, and every once in a while I check in on him. When he extended Sonny and they were doing great, I congratulate him. When Josh got an extension, I was like, dude, you're doing great. So it was just a natural, organic relationship and friendship, because that's how all business works.
How long did it take you to send back the memo of understanding this time?
There was back and forth.
Okay.
I fine-tooth combed it. I fine-tooth combed it a little bit. I also said, now how many of these are going out?
Right.
One going out.
Okay,
so then, you know, Sonny, so then when Thursday of last week, when Wyoming came open, I thought Sonny's going to get that job, right? Because again, so much of it's about who you follow, and he's liked there, but they need some positive, they need a shot of positive energy, because everybody's kind of down on the program after, 3 years ago, they were really good. Last 2 years have been bad. So Friday, I'm getting, like, my show starts at noon here. 12:04, Josh calls me, and I call him during the first break, and I'm like, dude, I'm on the radio. He's like, dude, are you still interested?
Right.
I said, yeah. I said, can we talk about it later? Sure. So we talked a little bit, and, I can't tell you it's the same bat plan, same bat channel as last year, but this year I spent as a consultant at Oklahoma State, going back and forth with Mike Boynton. And I'm actually way more equipped in terms of running a program, what I want, what I need, how I want to do it. I have a much better feel for the world of NIL and how recruiting goes. Game preps, staff. I mean, Mike is an amazing human being, and he was incredibly kind to basically say, here, sit with me, and we'll do meetings with players together. So I've actually been in all those meetings. I've done all those things, even though I wasn't technically full-time on staff. Shout out to Mike Boynton. And so this year, I felt like I had a much better sense of how I want to do it, what I want to do it, even though the staff dynamics are going to change a little bit.
So what do we need to know, Doug? I mean, like, everybody's going to look at this and go, Doug Gottlieb, right? How do you explain why you're the guy? I mean, win over the fans right now. It's exciting.
I would say that I believe this, because I would ask, like, John. John's the perfect guy. Okay. Do you think it's no, I'm just asking you on, and listen, you can answer this however you want to answer it. But when you heard the head coach at Green Bay, what was your immediate reaction?
No, I thought that I was surprised for two things. Well, one, I think absolutely there's the right guy. Like, I don't know anybody that I've met that knows more basketball, knows every guy, knows every team that's going on. Like, there's nobody more well-versed. I was surprised that just you found a job that you would take outside of Oklahoma State. And I've always thought the Oklahoma State thing could have been yours anytime you wanted it if you had gone and just been an assistant someone for 1 year. And I get what's going on. Kids, the radio show, TV, all that other stuff. And I thought you could have had, because every time it came open, right, you're like, how do I get this job? We chat. And I always thought if you'd have just gone 1 year and been an assistant somewhere, sat on somebody's bench, and maybe that's what last year kind of ends up being when you talked about consulting, that you could have had that job in a heartbeat. And so when he did, I'm like, wow, he's finally going to make that leap, So that was the biggest surprise.
But did it
He
like
found someone.
like
he found
like,
a place
like
that he's willing to do.
You knowing me, again, a fan says, okay, you're radio, TV personality, but you actually know me, know how I operate. Is it the like? It's really interesting to me. No one in basketball thinks it's really that big a thing, right? Like all my friends in basketball is like, oh, that makes sense. It's people who don't know the sport or don't know how I operate, or how my brain works. So my point, and I think John's kind of making it, is that people who know me and knows the sport in depth, it makes total sense. It's more me choosing to go in than it is a school giving me an opportunity, whereas you haven't coached in college. In regards to the actual coaching and X and O's of it, I've coached more games in the last 7 years than anyone in America. Because when you coach AAU games, like you're doing, and my son was playing in different levels. I had at times I was coaching 12, 16 games in a weekend. Now I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that's as in depth a coaching as coaching Division I in the Horizon League at Green Bay. But what it does do, especially to those of us who like to process every moment, is it's like speed dating. And just perfect example, my son is a late bloomer and he's learning to play in terms of a trapping, rotating defense. So usually when I'm with him, like we don't press nearly as when I have him, we don't press nearly as much. We play a little bit more pack line, a little bit more traditional man-to-man defense. There are other teams that I have where I have more athleticism, and now I want to extend. So I've been able to kind of petri dish it with youth basketball, and I've coached the group in Israel that I coached twice. It's called the Maccabi Games team. That's like the Jewish Olympics. But the beauty to that is you have to select the roster. So it's like recruiting, because you are recruiting, because the best Jewish kids don't usually play in it because they all think they're NBA players or they're kind of above it. So you kind of got to recruit the best that you can. And then once you got to decide how you're going to play. And I did that twice over. And then we had 31 practices last time. And so about putting together practice plans. The second time I did it, I empowered my staff better. I was a better coach. My sideline decorum was better. Like I have improved. So all of these things I've kind of been preparing for this moment. And what do Green Bay fans need to know? Like, look, I was born in a gym. I was born in Whitefish Bay, Columbia Hospital, and I have a picture where I'm still in a stroller and I got a Panther backer sweatshirt on. When we moved to California and my dad was an assistant at Tex Winter in Long Beach State, I used to love to come to practice. And one, we would run under the bleachers at the Long Beach Arena where people would lose loose change. And then two, we'd sit out and watch, an absolute basketball savant in Tex Winter put together the triangle offense. I've been able to be a fly on the wall with the absolute best of the best, to the absolute highest part of this. And while there's no doubt it's beneficial to sit on somebody's bench and be a longtime assistant, the fact is that what happens when you're that guy is that's your reference point and you kind of don't know who you are as a coach. I've been able to put together my own teams and know who I am as a coach, all while assimilating all of that information from Brad Stevens, from Jay Wright, from Eddie Sutton, from Randy Bennett, from Mark Few, from like you name it, Tony Bent, Tony as well. He's been great to me. So I actually really think I've been preparing my whole life for this thing, which means if we lose, then my whole life has been completely wasted. But that's the and then, in terms of style of play, like, look, I really feel like I've been right there with the evolution of basketball. The point guard in me, you look at the difference in points per game at Oklahoma State before I got there and after I left. We went from averaging like 66 a game to averaging close to 80, and 1 year averaging over 80 a game. It's because I ran the offense. It was me and Sean Sutton at the time. Coach Sutton was not. He never drew up a play. That wasn't his style. That's not what made him a great coach. So I have a keen eye for offensive basketball. It's fun. It's wide open. It's also discipline oriented, but a little bit different discipline than you think. It's not about browbeating. It's about the discipline in hard, sharp cuts and knowing your rules and reading the defenses and getting the lane and playing off 2 feet and kicking out. We want to shoot threes and get layups. He who makes the most layups wins. So I have a definite offensive philosophy. Defensively, I'm going to empower my top assistant, and my assistant coaches are going to be more defensive minded, because that is what truly wins you games, right? Is rebounding, is not turning the basketball over, is getting stops. And that's how I like to roll. I handle the offense. He handles, somebody else handles the defense. We go out and get in the portal and use all those connections that John talked about to get the best possible fits. Not necessarily the biggest names, the best possible, because look, it's going to take a special guy to want to play for me. It's going to be in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It's going to play in the Horizon League, and that understands all the different elements to it. You got to go to class. We got to get the APR up, all those things. So yeah, I mean, that's the general gist of it. And here's one other thing. There's nothing I can say right now which is really going to prove it to you, right? Like, sure. I'm really good with spoken word. I can do the ice to the Eskimos. I can do all that stuff, right? But the reality is that all of it's just talk. People want to see good basketball. So do I. You'll see good basketball.
I don't know if this is my Eddie Sutton imitation or it's me doing Hunzi doing Eddie with Gottlieb, you're a bricklayer.
Yes.
But if it's,
I'm actually a really good shooting coach, believe it or not.
Some of the names that you've put out there, though, to me, and I look at your career, if you look at your dad, right, who's probably the most influential guy, your basketball, but Coach Sutton, Tex Winter, like these are old school dudes,
yeah.
right? And I guess once you get in those 94 feet, that's what you need. That part of it doesn't really change much. But how do you take sort of those philosophies, or maybe that's it. It stays in the rectangle and over here. But now in 2024, you're going to have to go find a team on the fly. By
the way, that's the beauty of coaching AAU, right?
Yeah.
Like, dude, you're coaching AAU, you don't know who's there until they're in layup lines. And even then they may have forgotten their jersey,
Yeah. Plus you're probably like Majerus. You probably got a kid stashed in Norway just waiting to come over if you get a job. Every time I'd see him at the final, he goes, well, I'm trying, but I got this really good kid right now in Norway. If I could just get him down, I could bring him over. But given the nil, that money that's in there, you're in a place right now that is not money rich. By the way, there aren't as many as people think there are that are money rich out there program wise. Where do you get your team? How do you put them together? And how do you keep a roster? Because we saw a great example of it here this past year with UWGB. Noah Roberts comes in, he's a star, and poof, off he goes.
Well, I think with Noah, I think that's actually a success story in 2024. Mm-hmm. And I don't look, the truth is that Oklahoma State changed my life, but all of the benefits that I've been able to get, I'm truly a believer that NIL is what you get after you graduate. You make a name for yourself, you get a cool job, you get to be around the program. You never have to work ever really again. But again, in 2024, I want to use Noah as the example for players who say, hey, coach, I'd love to come play for you, but, where are you guys NIL wise? We have some money, and we're going to get more money. And I'm going to go door to door, and if I have to, but I also have some friends who want to support this project and believe in me personally, and that I feel like are going to invest. But the Noah story is like, hey, I get that you can make 2x or 3x somewhere else. Okay. But like, we actually have an example of a kid who came to the Horizon League, killed it, and now has well into 6 figures in the salary. Right. Mm-hmm. So do I like that, that they're using the college basketball program to get the next job? Not really, but isn't that really the idea of college, right? We use it to get our next job. Now, do I think it sets them up for failure post-college? Sure. And, the argument to the kids who are, currently part of the roster is like, look, if you stay, we're going to build something special. And as anybody knows, especially a place like Green Bay, like Jeff Norgard, he don't have to buy a beer, right? Never has to buy a beer. Nah, ever.
Actually, we like it when he buys beer. We try really hard to get him to buy the beer.
Yeah, again, but he doesn't have to because he's Jeff. At some point, he can do. I'm Jeff Norgard. You're like, yeah. Anyway, the point is, how do you put together a team? I mean, like you said, I know everybody. I know guys in the portal, and I've been helping kids in the portal try to make quality decisions anyway. You have to have good relationships with the biggest NIL agents, and I do. You have to have relationships with international people, and I do. You have to have good relationships with AAU people, and I do. Does that mean that it's a locked up cinch? Like, no. And then you have to smartly hire your staff. How do you want to put together regions of the country? Recruiting still does matter, not because you necessarily want a ton of high school kids, but because you want to get them on the bounce back. There are going to be kids that you want to have stay for 4 or 5 years. And so you got to put it together piece by piece. My plan is to keep every player, even the one that went in the portal, every player back on the roster that's currently on the roster, and then add to that with a couple of pieces in the coming days. And I think when you do that, when you see it all come together, you'll be like, okay, here's the plan. And it'll make some sense. So it's a little bit late. Had it happened a month ago, I think the roster would have potentially looked better. But had it happened a month ago, I might not have gotten the job. Right. So there's what is it? Steve Martin says comedy is all about timing.
Timing.
So is life. So again, this is where can you put together something at the last second? I think I can. And let's see. Let's petri dish it for a year. But I can only promise you this. You will see a wide open 5-out style of guys moving the basketball, attacking the lane, shooting threes, playing their arse off. And to answer your other question, John, in terms of the 2024 athlete, they want to be coached. They want to be coached hard. They just want to be coached fair. Mm-hmm. They want their feelings to be heard. And I think having teenagers really, really helps. I think doing a radio show where I play a little younger than I am. And I think coaching kids, especially, middle school, high school kids, even little kids, gives you a different level of patience and understanding and talking about like what's really going on there, what's really below the surface there, and kind of put my psychologist hat on.
One of the first questions that you're going to get asked in the press conference is, are you keeping the radio show? Are you going to do both? And if you are, how's that going to work?
It's a great question. So, that's a big element to it. I feel like it's a promotional element for everything Green Bay. It doesn't mean we're going to do inside Green Bay Phoenix men's basketball at every moment. But there aren't any other Division I coaches that have a national radio show. So, yes, my radio show runs from 2 to 4 local, and I also have it's a podcast hour. I mean, I don't really do an hour, but a podcast as well. So it's going to be about time management skills. But I'm only really dark for those 2 hours. I don't require a ton of sleep. I have my first true hire is my Dobo / assistant coach. And he understands that his number one job is to tell me everywhere I'm supposed to be, when I'm supposed to be there, and make sure that I'm there. You're going to manage me because, again, I say yes to everything. That's my biggest flaw is I say yes to everybody. I get into deep conversations with lots of people. And, sometimes I run long in time. But last year I had a basketball program with several teams. I worked for Fox Sports Radio, Fox Television. I had a show on Stadium, a streaming show with Jeff Goodman. I worked for Compass Media. I worked for Westwood One. There's something. Oh, and then I did Oklahoma, and then I was with Oklahoma State as a consultant.
Oh yeah, the basketball.
That's 8 jobs. I was like, you guys remember in Living Color?
I was just going to say, were you an orderly at the
I got
hospital?
8 jobs, man. I'm the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker.
Yep, right? You're an orderly at the hospital. Good for you.
Right. So, like, all I got is 2 jobs now, and 2 of mine are off to college. So I feel pretty confident I can manage that time.
Didn't Tom Brennan used to do one in Vermont for
us? He did.
I don't know if it was every day.
Jim Val, yeah, it was every morning. Every morning.
Yeah.
So Jim Valvano did I think a nightly talk show in New York when he was the coach at NC State. That really happened. So, you know, I stole a word once from Jay Billis. So this is a real thing. Like, so how I think I got pretty good in that business is I used to show up early, and the late great Barry Sachs, may God rest his soul, would allow, he eventually put me on ESPN News back when ESPN News was awesome. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And I was in the box. I was with Pito in the box. Shug, I was in Pito. But what I would do was, and I could only be in the box on days when I did radio, because if I was doing radio, they didn't have to pay me for TV. Right. Those cheapies in Bristol. Anyway, but what I would do is when Herbie was going to be on in the box, I would find out, and I would go and sit and like, hey, Herbie, do you mind if I watch you? Right? And I would do the same thing with JB, with Billis. And Jay, he uses those great big words that those Duke lawyers like to use.
Sure.
And the word was indefatigable. And I love it. I stole it. I use it. I give speeches on it. And the answer to the question of how am I going to do it is I'm going to be indefatigable.
You can't just say I don't get tired.
No, you can. Here's the Eddie Sutton in it. Like, you can be tired, you just can't play tired. Right? So, which is a great way of looking at it. Like, you can say, and I know what I'm signing up for. I know what I'm doing. I wake up every day, and I love having a purpose. I love having a team. I love building culture. I want the kids to love playing with each other, for each other, and for the school. And they may like playing for me. I just want them to respect playing for me. I'm like way down in the totem pole of what I want. And I think that's, you wake up every day and you think, all right, how can we help them get better? How can we help them get more cohesive? And then, you know, the process of doing a sports radio show when you've done it for 21 years is kind of easy. It's actually harder to not do than it is to do. It's weird. Like, I guarantee, like, John, like when Sports Center goes away, you're going to be sitting there going like, man, I kind of miss the craziness, you know, kind of, you miss the typing. You miss all
on that one.
The problem, I'm going to tell you what it is. Okay. The problem is never, I can almost bet if you did a real interview, it's not the job, it's the upstairs, it's all the other ancillary things. If you just said, hey, do you want to write and do Sports Center every night? Like, hell yeah, I do that anytime. Okay, but then you have to do this highlight. We have to do it in this order. You can't say that, like, score, highlight, sarcastic comment. That's what I learned from you, right? Bump to break.
That's from Kenny Mayne, yeah. Highlight, score, smart ass remark, break. Yes.
It works, right? Yeah. Anyway, the point is, it's the same thing with, like, why I like doing my radio show is my bosses are great. You know, I don't have meetings. If they have an issue, they call me and we talk through it and I fix it. And so everything's in who you work for. And I have a good relationship with Mike, and a really good relationship with Josh, and just continue to foster that relationship as well, and have open, honest conversations. If they feel like my time is not being spent in the proper ways, we'll have a conversation about it. But I know I'm indefatigable. I know I can do it. So
this is the last one for me, because it'll be fun, and we'll get you back, because I think people would be fascinated to hear more about your daughter that jumps horses and your daughter that is going to be a bass player in a band and all these other things, and just your journey through basketball, the people you know. Obviously, but you have ties to Dave Buss, who is the founder of this program. So just real quick, because I know your dad and he were close. Just you're kind of like, you talk about the 10th coach, like you're tethered to the first coach of this program too, which is really ironic.
Yeah, it's interesting. So my dad took the Milwaukee job in 1975. I was born in 76. And if you remember, Title IX was 79. And right after he left, UWM went back to D3, right? Before what, Bo resurrected it, right? Was Bo took it out of D3 to D1. So, yeah, I mean, that's like literally how it works. And what's interesting about it is my dad was an unbelievable fundraiser back when he had the Panther backers was what it was. So yeah, he knew all those guys. And then the other way in which I've connected with so many different coaches in Wisconsin is, and I don't know how many people know this, but my dad, and I've kind of done this for years as well. When he started, it was travel ball before his AU ball. When he started his teams, his big thing was every kid plays Division I basketball. That's my goal. Every kid gets a scholarship. And then, eventually he had like 6 teams. And so at some point, somebody said to him, like, Bob, why don't you make money doing this? Mm-hmm. So he ran, the last 15 years of his life, he had a placement service. And basically what he was like an NIL agent, but he charged the parents because in reality, the scholarship is incredibly valuable. It's life-changing. Mm-hmm. And so he would go evaluate a kid, say, hey, your son can play D1, D2, D3, this level, whatever. What's his grades like? Put together a highlight tape, and they would pay him based upon where their kid ended up. They ended up at the right level. Anyway, that job that he created allowed him to stay connected with all these coaches. So there's not a gym that I have ever gone in where there's not a guy on staff. And my dad's been dead for 10 years in November. And there's not a gym I've ever walked into where there's not a coach like, hey man, your dad used to call me about players every year. And I know how the conversations went, like his players were better than the players you have on staff, right. Like whatever. But the point is that, you go back to the 70s in Wisconsin and you look at the wellspring of coaching talent that started with Coach Buss, and then obviously with Coach Bennett and with Coach Ryan, and my dad getting a chance to kind of be a part of that story. I mean, my dad's manager at UW Milwaukee and was Bruce Weber. And he hired Bruce Weber as his manager because his best player was Dave Weber, right? I wear 44. I wear 44 because my favorite player growing up when I was just a little kid wore 44 for my dad at UW Milwaukee. So that's how far we go back.
Well, Doug, good news and bad news. Good news, we're happy to have you. Bad news, we're not fans of Milwaukee. I mean,
no. I'm not. Hey, listen, I'm ready to continue that rivalry with Bart.
So fun. It is so fun.
So much fun.
Yeah.
So much fun.
Well,
Doug Gottlieb, you go, Jay.
Nope. I was just going to tell you, good luck to you. I know you've been waiting for this for a while. Personally, I hope it sticks. I don't know that this is a 15-year job for you, but hopefully we get more than one out of you, because this is the program I grew up on. So as much as I love Norm Stewart and the Tigers, I grew up on this one, and I hope it's super successful for you. I know the town will embrace you, and hopefully now people who can get you tickets when Rodgers comes back with the Jets at some point, so that my mom and I are off the hook. So good luck to you, brother.
Well, but John, you're not off the hook for something he just said, which is it's the program you grew up on.
Yep.
Now that you're retiring, you want to help us out a little bit? Well, right? I mean, like, listen, you want to help us out? Like, listen,
you asked for a quote for the press release. How much turnip you want? Blood you want out of this turnip?
Well, there's no blood to do a quote from a press release, but a couple of those hard-earned Disney dollars I know you go to the mailbox and that wipeout money still comes in.
I'm out of the Disney money. That's it. I'm out. And yeah, I don't know that would be great if you could do as a Disney matching funds for nil money. Then you really would have something. I don't know that they.
I like it. I like it. Let's work on it. Let's talk about it. We'll get it.
Go get your team together, man. I know you probably got 10 billion things to do.
I do. Hey guys, thanks for the opportunity. Let's do this again, and talk real soon. Go Pack, go, and we'll talk soon.
See you, brother.
Cheers.
Shut up and sit down.